Welcome to the Village Sentry interview with Ben Sorensen, Democratic candidate for Congress, District 23. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing great, Fred. How about you?
Okay, I'm fine. Usually what we do in these interviews, just to warm you up, is give you about 3-4 minutes and briefly give us a little biographical, where you were born, when you moved to Florida, if you're not a native, your family, your anything you want to talk about. The floor is yours, sir.
That sounds great, Fred. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the chance to share. I'll start off with my family, which is starting off with my dad. My dad, after college, this will kind of give you a little bit of sense. After college, he grew up in Joliet, Illinois. And so after he graduated from college, he started hearing about an organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was emerging in Atlanta. And my dad went down there after college and started working there, organizing Freedom Riders and helping challenging the segregation that was occurring in the segregated South. And I share that because that's kind of foundational for me, as both my dad and my mom, just their kind of lifelong commitment to fighting for equality and fighting for those who are disadvantaged and not given the voice that others have. And so my mom was a nutritionist and dietitian for AIDS and cancer patients in the 80s when it was called GRIDS. And I remember my parents both fighting for funding at the federal level for a disease that was just ravaging, especially the LGBTQ community. So grew up in that type of environment and graduated from Emory University and worked up in New York City. And as I was working in corporate America in New York City, started volunteering through Junior Achievement, helping in public schools there, which I loved, and I really felt called to teach. So I moved back home to Florida. I'd grown up primarily in Gainesville, Florida, and moved back home down here to South Florida. And I became a teacher. I taught high school American and world history in Miami. That inspired me. I felt like I was able to make a big difference as a teacher. So I reached out to the two U.S. senators at the time, Senator Bob Graham, Senator Bill Nelson. Senator Bob Graham hired me, and I worked for Senator Bob Graham in D.C. on educational policy, and really found someone who was making an amazing difference. And so that cued in my mind, maybe one day I would run for office, and went to law school at Georgetown in D.C. and then moved back home to Florida here in Fort Lauderdale, where I founded a business doing sales training, leadership training. I joined the Navy Reserves. I've been in the Navy now 14 years. And then I ran for city commission here in Fort Lauderdale in 2017, won in 2018. I've been a city commissioner ever since.
Okay. How many commissioners, by the way, served on that commission? We have 7 in Palm Beach County. Yeah.
Yeah, in the city of Fort Lauderdale, we have 4 commissioners and 1 mayor. So it's 5 of us total. And it's as you're probably familiar, it's a weak mayoral form of government. So we have a strong city manager.
Sure. Okay, and let me start off with a little screen share, because there's been some redistricting, and Sam, your campaign aide, was kind enough, because I couldn't find the darn thing, to supply me with, let me just get the right, let's see, I think it's this one. Yeah, okay. I see it on my iPad. So are you looking at the map? Very good.
I am, yep.
So tell us a little about this. I noticed that most of the maps online are old, and they seem to end around I-75. But now, of course, it's been going, it goes a little further north. Now, where it says CBW, most of my viewers are in Century Village West. And we just sort of make it by, a few meters or feet, whatever you want to call it. Well, tell us about that. What's going on with this redistricting?
Yeah, so the redistricting process was an interesting one. So the governor, working with the state legislature, developed a redistricting map. This map, as it in current form, as you see it, really does a huge disservice to our minority voters, especially in northern Florida. There were 2 minority access districts that are now eliminated. I think that Governor DeSantis, how he went about this, was completely unfair. There's lawsuits being filed against how this process was handled, and to the detriment of minority voters throughout our state. So this is, as you see, this is the district for District 23 as it stands now. And my guess is that it will stand through the August primary, August 23rd primary, and then November election. This district, as you see here, it kind of goes from Fort Lauderdale all the way up to Boca, and then goes west, as you see. And one of the fascinating parts about this is that it's a very much of a coastal district on the east side, and then goes into Coral Springs and Parkland and so forth as you go west. Now, Fred, as you probably well know, this is a heavily Democratic district. So the voter registration skews significantly Democratic. So the Democratic primary is August 23rd. And by all accounts, whoever wins the Democratic primary on August 23rd is going to be the clear favorite to be our next member of Congress. Ted Deutsch is our current member of Congress, as you all know. He announced several months ago that he will not be running for re-election and will be leading the American Jewish Committee. I think Congressman Deutsch has done an amazing job, and so that's where we are in the congressional district.
By the way, you're not used to this, but we're actually currently represented by Lois Frankel.
Oh, that's right, because you're just...
Yeah, right. It's very confusing, don't you know? Yep. So just so you know, you would be replacing Lois Frankel in this newly formed district. I don't even remember what number she was, but it's not really that relevant.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So you already got the date of the primary in, which I'll just say again is August 23rd. And okay, so let's just talk before we get into the nitty gritty a little bit about how people can vote. There are 3 ways to vote. You can vote by mail, you can vote by person, or you can early vote. Now, the vote by mail, you do have to sign up for. Is that correct? It's not automatic, right?
That's correct. You have to sign up for that. Go to the Supervisor of Elections website for Palm Beach County, Broward County, wherever you might live. For you, it's mostly going to be Palm Beach, and register there. But you need to do it soon because the deadline is quickly approaching for the end of vote by mail.
And the deadline, as you mentioned, for filing for these offices, I think it's tomorrow. Is that right?
Exactly right. It's this Friday, I think, at noon. So tomorrow at noon. So we'll know the totality of who's in the race by then.
You're all filed and everything.
Correct. Yep.
I don't want you to forget, and miss the
thank you.
Miss the election. Now, what about so the mail ballots? I think by legislation have to go out something like about 30 or 45 days in advance of August 23rd. So I guess that would make it roughly mid-July, approximately. And of course, it all started during COVID, that mail balloting became more popular as people were afraid to get in line. Is there any reason why people should be reluctant to vote by mail? Do you have faith in the vote by mail? By the way, they don't call it absentee ballot anymore. That's an archaic expression because it somehow implies, you're absent, you're deficient, you're missing, so they changed it to VBM or voice by mail. Can people be confident to vote by mail that their vote will be counted?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Fred. The Florida electoral system and the county supervisor of elections, both Palm Beach County, Broward County, fantastic systems. Very reliable. Encourage everyone. Vote by mail. It's easy. You can do it at your leisure. You can ensure it's tracked and received. You can go online and make sure that your vote is there and has been counted. So there's great ways to ensure that it's there. It also gives you the advantage. If something happens, if you go on or call up or go online and you're seeing your ballot's not there, you can remedy that. You can talk to them. Hey, it's not showing up, or you're saying you didn't get it. You can fix that well in advance of the election day to ensure your vote will count.
All right. And I don't know if they're going to do it this year, but I think last year the postage was paid. Do you know if there's any?
Yes, my understanding is it will be paid.
Okay, now if people still don't want to do that, they have an early voting option. I think it's about 10 days before the the election's on a Tuesday, and I believe the early voting will start 2 Saturdays prior to that? Is that your
I
understanding?
think you're right, Fred. I think you're right. And check online or call up the supervisor just to double check your location where you will vote, because the early voting locations can be a little bit different than where you normally might vote in person. So just double check on that. But yes, it's generally about 2 weeks in advance of the election.
And it's also my understanding that you don't have to vote in your home district. You can vote at any of the early voting sites. So if you're shopping at Costco and you want to vote on the east side, et cetera, is that correct? You can.
That's my understanding as well, Fred. Yep.
Now, for informational purposes, the early voting site usually for Sentry Village is the West Boca Branch Library on State Road 7, just north of Yamato Road. And that's probably going to be it, but I haven't, confirmed it, but that's traditionally where we early vote. And then finally, the traditional thing is just show up on the 23rd. The polls open, I think 7 and close at 7
a.m. Yep.
7 to 7, and you vote in person. And what's the most important thing that you need to bring with you if you vote in person?
If you're bring some form of identification. So preferably I'd suggest a driver's license or state ID is probably going to make it easiest.
Photo ID, though, is a
photo ID. Yep.
And a voter registration card, I understand, is not legal ID for voting purposes. It's just to show that you've been registered. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me go on to some of my questions here. Let me put on a screen share. Now, I know you have some religious background. I believe you were a chaplain in the Navy. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm currently a police chaplain for the Hollywood Police Department. I'm in the Navy as well, but I'm an intelligence officer.
All right, and I think you're let me see, is this the right? I don't think this is the right one. Oh, this is the right one. Okay, and I believe you're. I looked up your website. A Presbyterian, is that your religious affiliation? Yep. Okay, now. What I want to discuss is the issue of separation of church and state. Now, I'm a firm believer of the First Amendment, and of course that gives everybody freedom of religion, even before they mention freedom of speech, because as we all know, this country was founded on people want to be able to worship, that nobody can, take any actions against them. But this is my problem. I'm an atheist, okay? I grew up, we were too poor to believe in God, I like to say. And although I'm Jewish, I was never bar mitzvahed. And I've grown up my life, in a very secular manner. And although I believe in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, I don't really believe in the supreme being. And of course, the First Amendment protects me. Nobody can say, get out, you have to have a religion. So approximately 1/4 of the country now are atheists, maybe larger, but a lot of people are just in the closet on that. All right. So what I want to say is this is the flag of the state of Florida, and you can see the motto is "In God We Trust." Doesn't this violate separation of church and state? Why, when I go into a government building, do I have to pass under a sign or a flag that says "In God We Trust"? Do you think that's appropriate? That it doesn't have any significance to me, and I find it a turnoff. It would be like, I'm not to single out Muslims, but if it said "In Allah We Trust," or it would be offensive to people. So what's your take on that? Do you think it's appropriate in 2022 when we have separation of church and state, and also currency? Every bill in your wallet says "In God We Trust." When we pledge allegiance, we have to say "One nation under God." Is that really appropriate in this day and age when so many people have simply given up on God? I guess because of COVID, the Holocaust, hurricanes, tornadoes. A lot of people just think it's passé. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, completely can understand your perspective. I think when you look at the Constitution, the Establishments Clause, the concern the constitutional writers and founders of our country has expressed in that clause was, is the government getting unnecessarily entangled in the establishment of a religion, unnecessarily advocating for a religion to the exclusion of others? And so for me, that's the litmus test is, are we expressing preferential treatment over one religion or a non-religion or any religion in and of itself? And so I think as a community, as a country, it is critical and vital that we include all, and we don't give preference to one versus the other. So as long as we're being inclusive as a country and as a body, not to the exclusion of others, I'm comfortable with where we are.
Well, yes, I can appreciate that. But again, although atheism is not a religion, I mean, I feel excluded. I feel, now, by the way, the Pledge of Allegiance didn't always contain "In God We Trust." That was amended, I believe, in the 50s, in the post-World War II, McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, he said, you know, if you don't believe in God, you're a communist. There was that whole ugly chapter in our history. And I think that's about the time that they added "In God We Trust." Don't you feel that we should just strip all references to religiosity in state mottos and Pledge of Allegiance? It's exclusionary. It really is. I'm not comfortable saying I trust in God if I don't believe in God. How do you answer that?
Yeah, I would say, you know, for example, in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you don't feel comfortable saying God, then, you know, don't say it. And you know, be comfortable expressing your individuality and beliefs there. And so I would encourage that to be part of everyone's practice, to only do and say that which they really are convicted and feel believed in.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about some current event stuff. Everybody, we're all getting numb from all of the mass shootings. Of course, Uvalde was one of the more deadly incidents and everything. What's your position on the whole gun control issue, and what have you done personally by way of trying to stop all of this?
Yeah.
And now, are you a gun owner, by the way?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. So yeah, so I'm in the United States Navy. I've been in 14 years, as I mentioned. I'm trained on a multitude of weapons in my capacity as a Navy Reserve officer. So I am very familiar with a host of weapons. And the weapons that we currently allow for sale and distribution in the United States is unacceptable. We need to renew the assault weapons ban that has lapsed. I am very familiar with these weapons because I'm trained on them as an officer. These are weapons of war. They do not belong on our streets, in our schools, in our communities. So the assault weapons need to be banned permanently. Second thing that needs to happen, we need to eliminate mass capacity magazines. These are, again, this is a military grade functionality that does not belong on our streets. Third thing we need to have happen, national background checks. And not only is this a safety for all of us in the community, this is a safety standard for our police, our first responders. We are often outgunned and outmatched when we're dealing with criminals with assault grade weapons. And the fourth thing is really improving federal red flag laws. So those are the pieces that I'm going to drive for when I'm elected to Congress. And what have I done here locally? I'll tell you a couple things that I've done here locally in the city of Fort Lauderdale since being elected a city commissioner and now the vice mayor of the city of Fort Lauderdale. Is when I was elected, there was a gun show on city of Fort Lauderdale park property. In our city parks where children were playing, there were gun shows. I led the effort to remove those gun shows immediately from the city of Fort Lauderdale park property. We were sued, we prevailed. The next step I took is I want us as a city to be able to have the ability and authority to have common sense gun control in our city. And what that means is the ability to not allow weapons in public buildings, the ability to have background checks. And so we have sued Governor DeSantis, along with leading the effort, along with about 40 other municipalities, and sued the state of Florida to say, we want to enact common sense legislation. We're going to push to do that. And so that continues in the courts.
Okay, very good answer. I don't know if you heard my little follow-up. Are you personally a gun owner?
Yes, I'm a gun owner.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You do have a family. I'm seeing if I can bring up a picture, and you're certainly entitled to protect them. And by the way, they are, I believe, probably around the same age as why don't you introduce us?
Yes. It's kind of you, Fred. So this is myself, my wife, Anna, at the city commissioning swearing in. The taller young lady there is Alex, our now 8-year-old, and Louise is the other one, our 5-year-old. So they go to Broward County Public Schools, and they're just a joy.
And let's see, I think I have another picture. No, maybe not. And what do you think about when they go to school each day after you read all of these horrible stories? Are you concerned? Do you feel that the schools need to be hardened more, single entrances, transparent backpacks? What can be done to make these a more difficult target for the deranged people that go in and start shooting?
Yeah, Fred, every day I drop my children off at school, the last thought I have is, gosh, I pray that they are going to be okay today. That is literally the last thought I have as they go, as they leave the car. And during the day, we as parents, you get code red notices on your phone. And you know, the vast majority of the time, those notices say this is a test and this will be a test. And then there are periodic times where it's real. The level of fear and concern that myself and other parents live in is just horrible. And it not only is the parents, but the children. Children live with this fear when they're at school. So thus, we have to do far more. And so in the city of Fort Lauderdale, we partnered to make sure that we have officers at every one of our schools, public schools here in the city of Fort Lauderdale, and partnering with our private schools to ensure they have all the resources they need. So yes, we need to make sure our schools are as safe as possible. And that starts with all of the common sense gun legislation that I shared with you earlier.
Now, of course, closer to home, Parkland, the St. Valentine's Day massacre with I forgot it. What's his? I forgot his first. Nicholas Cruz, and he's. I believe he's pled guilty, but now there's going to be a very long sentencing
phase now.
Yeah. Determine. I guess the purpose of it is to determine life in prison or the death penalty. We still have a death penalty in Florida, do we?
Yes.
Yeah. I think at one point it was the electric chair, old Sparky, but I think they've added lethal injection. What's your take on a death penalty? Is that something that a civilized society should embrace for deterrent effect? Obviously, it doesn't deter many people. And there's always the possibility, certainly not in the case of some of the recent shootings, of killing the wrong person, an innocent person. What do you think about the death penalty as an issue?
Yeah, so, well, with the horror perpetrated at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, at the time I was a Fort Lauderdale police chaplain. And so I responded there that next day to work with families and students who were in the midst of this absolute horror. And so my heart went out then and continues to go out to all those affected there. And so seeing and experiencing that, you know, the firsthand of working with the children and the students that were going through this, just left an indelible impression that we are not doing enough as a society, and we need to do more. And in terms of, you know, punishment and death penalty and so forth, you know, I still have such, such hurt from what happened that I can't say one way or another what should be the penalty for him, but I think that I'm very confident our judicial system is going to really carry out the right justice. Now,
one of the I think it was the school safety officer was in the Parkland situation was criticized for not going in. And we heard the term Broward coward. And of course, now in Uvalde, we're seeing the same type of situation where the police, you know, they just don't seem to want to go in. Now, I understand that if they think it's just a barricade situation, I understand that going in could cause the guy to finish off everybody versus a negotiation. And I know it's a tough call, but do you think in the case of either Parkland or the Uvalde, that the police derelicted their duty, that they have an obligation to go in. Some of the parents pushed right past them. One woman ran into the school and grabbed her kids and rescued them. And then when she started talking about it on social media, she was threatened that she was going to have her probation revoked. I don't know what her crime was, but doesn't really matter. And then what I did hear was that the judge that supervises her probation says, we're going to shorten your probation because we think you did the right thing. So what can we say about the state of the art of policing where parents feel they have to push their way in and rescue their own kids? What's your take on that?
Yeah, this is a major concern of mine. And so I asked our police chief here in the city of Fort Lauderdale. I know the training can be different based on department and policy and procedure. And so I don't know all of the policies and procedures, but I asked our chief, what's for the city of Fort Lauderdale, what's our stance? And I was told, we go in, you enter, you breach, you confront, even risk of life and limb, you do that. And that's one of the reasons that my hat goes off to our law enforcement officers, is because that's what they are willing to do. That's what they commit to doing. And I think that's the right approach.
Okay, fine. Moving on now. I don't know if you've been watching it, but I caught a little, at least the opening day of the so-called January 6th hearings, which are primarily informational, and based on what comes out there, they may pursue criminal charges against former President Donald Trump. What do you feel about, now you're a Democrat, obviously, I expect you have a little bit of bias on this. Do you feel that this is a political retaliation against Trump, or do you feel that this is really beyond politics, that he incited riots and that his own daughter was begging him, Daddy, you got to get somebody in there, call out the guard? Give us your take on January 6th, if you will.
Yeah, what happened on January 6th was criminal. This was insurrection bent on toppling the foundations of our democratic institutions and need to be persecuted to the greatest extent of the law, bar none. And this resulted in loss of life and limb. And so there needs to continue to be a full investigation, and holding accountable all of those responsible, including former President Donald Trump.
Well, all right, that's fine. But do you have an opinion on Donald Trump's culpability? Do you think
he's absolutely encouraging these criminal acts and criminal behaviors? Absolutely. And I think that's what the facts are clearly showing, is that he was the ringleader of much of this and encouraged these criminal behaviors, and which led to real consequences. And luckily, as a democracy, we've survived that frontal attack, and we need to hold those responsible, including the former president.
So during the 2016 presidential race with Hillary Clinton, he was popularized the expression "lock her up." Do you think Trump ought to be locked up?
I think you follow the full legal proceedings, and I think there's more to uncover here. But if there is substantial evidence, absolutely, and it sure seems like there is substantial evidence in terms of his role in inciting what happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. I think we were in agreement on that.
Yep.
I'm a Democrat. If I haven't announced it, I certainly am a lifetime Democrat. Okay, let's go on to another hot button issue. It's big in Florida, and of course national, and that's the potential repeal of Roe v. Wade, which was, I think, the 1973 amendment that legalized abortion. And what's your feeling on that? Should abortion be legal or not?
Abortion should be legal. A woman has the right to choose, and let's keep the government out of that decision. This has been established constitutional law for years, and now you're seeing, MAGA Republicans, including Ron DeSantis, trying to change this. And it is an affront. It is an attack on women's rights. And as a community, as a society, we need to stand up and reject this and allow women to have the right to choose.
Okay, so you wouldn't set any limits, like, for example, there was this Hyde Amendment Do you support repeal of the Hyde Amendment? I think it legalized abortion, certain exceptions, rape, and I'm not totally up to speed on that, but you think it should just be unconditional?
We need to codify Roe v. Wade is what needs to happen. Gosh, especially in the instances of incest and rape, should a woman have the choice, as she should, even outside of those examples. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about running. Is one of the folks I'm running against is a Ron DeSantis appointee, hiree. Jared Moskowitz has worked for Ron DeSantis. We do not need MAGA policies limiting women's right to choose and minority rights. And that's one of the real reasons we need to, that I'm running for Congress.
Do you have any personal favorite in the Democratic primary for governor right now with the withdrawal of Annette Taddeo? It's down to former Governor Charlie Crist. Of course, he was originally a Republican. He changed his party affiliation. Nothing wrong with that. People do it and they see the light, and okay. And then you have Nikki Fried, the only statewide Democrat elected in the last cycle. Do you have any favorite on that?
I think they're both. I don't. I think they're both great people, and I think whoever wins is going to have a fantastic shot at taking Ron DeSantis out.
Do you think that DeSantis? Do you think Ron DeSantis, or as like some of the people in the Democratic Party refer to him, Ron DeSatan? Do you think he's going to challenge, assuming that Trump is able to be nominated? Do you think he's going to challenge him for the nomination? Or do you think he should challenge him for the nomination?
I can absolutely see Ron DeSantis running for president in in 2024. It would not surprise me, shock me at all. He is trying to out MAGA Donald Trump, and that is what his policies are, whether it's his Ron DeSantis idea of allowing people to carry weapons without permits, whether it's attacking minority rights, whether it's attacking women's rights or LGBTQ rights. This is the last thing we need in our state, and this is the last thing we need in our country.
Okay. What would you do to save Social Security and Medicare? This is a state of senior citizens, obviously, and it's very, very important. I'm on Social Security. I use Medicare, and I know it's important to me. What would you do by way of reassuring the voters that you'll fight for that?
Yeah. So number one, we need to not attack it. You have members of the Republican Party who are attacking and saying, hey, we need to cut back benefits. That is absolutely unacceptable. And I'm going to fight not only to keep our current benefits from a Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare standpoint, we actually need to increase our healthcare coverage. So that's where we got to look at expanding Medicaid and Medicare and expanding the total number of Americans that are covered. Because here's what we found is if you can offer coverage for members of our state, member of our country, they're going to avail themselves of that insurance coverage to stay healthy. And what the research shows is a healthier American who checks in with their doctor regularly costs society much less, rather than if they don't have coverage and they go to the ER when they're really sick as a primary care function, then as a society, we're much more heavily burdened. So there's a real economic advantage to insuring as many people and ensuring they have quality health care. Now,
in looking at your family, you all seem to be, fairly trim folks. And one of the big issues, especially during COVID, was the increase in obesity in this country, and obesity and all the associated diseases, heart disease, diabetes, et cetera, is probably responsible for more hospitalizations than any other factor. Now, during the Obama administration, the First Lady, Michelle, was very big on nutrition. Do you have any guidelines for Americans? Would you like to see more emphasis placed on diet and nutrition and staying within the guidelines? What are they called? Body mass index, if you will. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, this matters. And this matters not only from an American health standpoint, from a cost standpoint for how much the society has to burden a lot of the healthcare costs. and also from a national security standpoint, because we want, fit, able-bodied individuals be able to serve in our military and our police and so forth. So this really matters. One of the things we've been really working in the city of Fort Lauderdale is increasing affordable and workforce housing. So making sure we have fair cost housing opportunities within our city. And so we've been taking city land and building affordable housing units on city land and expanding the number of affordable housing units. Part of that is a lot of times in our lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, there are healthy food deserts, there are fruit deserts, vegetables. So in other words, we don't have the good health options in a lot of our communities. And so what we've been doing is working very intentionally with healthy food providers to make sure that there are healthy food options in our communities. Another thing we've been doing in the city is the city of Fort Lauderdale residents approved a $200 million park bond. This has allowed us to buy amazing new park property around the city, upgrade our parks so we have playgrounds and activity areas for all to participate in the community. So we've got to invest in those kind of things, Fred, that allow healthy walking, healthy food choices, healthy community engagement to help really address the obesity epidemic that's really gripping our country.
Okay, on a related subject, I want to turn now to the largest crop in Florida, the one that's larger than all the other crops put together, and that, of course, is sugar. Now, I've been on my own personal level campaigning for a number of years to get the sugar industry to switch to green harvest. Just for those people that aren't familiar with it, sugar cane has a leaf around it. The leaf is useless. So before they can harvest the cane, they have to remove the leaf. What they're doing in the state of Florida now is they burn the leaf off. They do these 20-minute, what they call pre-harvest burns of the leaf. And after 20 minutes, the leaves are off, and then they can just plow the sugar cane and bring it to the mill and harvest it. Unfortunately, that practice, although it's very efficient for the sugar industry because it's not labor intensive, it doesn't have to be paid a salary, and it's very quick. It's poisoning the atmosphere. We have the Palm Beach Post was recently cited for their excellent series called Black Snow. Black Snow referring to the ash that's generated by these pre-harvest burns. The green harvest, on the other hand, which Thailand, Brazil, and Australia have embraced, involves going in with manual labor and cutting the leaf off with machetes, essentially. And this would eliminate the burning of the sugar. So what do you feel about that? Now, there was recently legislation passed in Florida that says you cannot make a law that affects agriculture. Do you think that it's right for the state to protect the practice that's causing childhood asthma, that's lowering property values around Lake O, Pahokee, and Glades area? What do you think about the pre-harvest burns of sugar?
Yeah. So one, Fred, thank you for your advocacy on this and work on this. It is very important. I completely agree with you. This has a massively negative environmental impact. I think I'm the only candidate in my race that is refusing to accept any money from U.S. Sugar. I know one of my opponents, Jared Moskowitz, has. I am not taking any money from U.S. Sugar because of the practice you just shared, which has a huge negative environmental impact. And also, other practices of theirs are really major threats and ongoing threats to Lake Okeechobee, to the Everglades. And so as a state, as a member of Congress, what I'm going to be advocating for is to protect our environment. Our environment is the draw that so many come to Florida to celebrate, to experience, and so forth. And so if we're sacrificing that, not only from a tourism standpoint, but also from a health standpoint, we are being very short-sighted, and I promise not to do that and to advocate for our environment up and down.
Now, you did mention that you anticipated my next question, which is there's been a movement about a month or two ago, and bipartisan, I might add. I know Brian Mast, the Republican, was behind this, and that would be to get all candidates in Florida to do what you're doing, which is not take money, not just from Big Sugar, by the way, but Little Sugar.
Absolutely.
Dixie Crystals, United Sugar Growers. So you've taken that personal pledge. You won't take any money from Big Sugar. Is that correct?
Absolutely not.
Well, I applaud you for that. And by the way, what people have to understand, we're not out to kill the sugar industry. There are too many jobs. It's a very important part of our economy. But they do get a $4 billion with a B subsidy from Uncle Sam. And I just think it's time that we outlaw it. And I don't know what we can do, but in the short term, we're doing what you did, which is not allow these people to control your vote by making you beholden to them. And I'm glad that you did it. Now, you mentioned, I think I heard you say that your opponent is taking contributions.
Yes, that's my understanding. Yep.
Right.
And Fred, to your point, think about the subsidy sugar industry gets. I mean, look at that number you just mentioned. So let's hold them accountable. Let's say, hey, hold on. We are not going to support you unless you practice fair and appropriate environmental standards in farming and in taking care of the environment.
And just as a footnote to that, since cutting the leaf is labor intensive, it would generate jobs. It wouldn't eliminate.
Great. It's a great point.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've exhausted that. Now let's turn to a little bit of international stuff. What do you think is the bigger threat to the world today? Would it be Russia or China or some other country? Do you have a position on that? You're going to be going to Washington. Foreign policy will be your beat, and maybe you'll be on one of these committees. What's your feeling on who the bigger threat is? And then we'll get to the Ukraine war. But just in general, Russia or China, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, so, again, having served in the military 14 years now, I've served at the Pentagon for about 5 years, ultimately under the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So spent a lot of time evaluating threats to the U.S., both country and non-country actors, and supporting our allies like Israel and ensuring their security and ensuring, the security and safety of other key democracies around the world. So spent a lot of time thinking about this and working with agencies around the U.S. To ensure our national security. We have a host of threats that are kind of real towards the United States. China's absolutely one. So China has been growing its military footprint, increasing the amount of resources it invests in it. Look, as a military, the United States is unrivaled. We are unmatched. However, we are quickly being threatened by platforms and by expenditures and by the development of weapon technology. So we have to invest now more than ever in our defense and in our military. I'm a big believer of Teddy Roosevelt's concept of speak softly and carry a big stick. So we need to continue to invest in our national defense, period. We need to continue to invest in our key allies like Israel, period. Now, China's real. Russia is obviously a critical threat to us as well. That increases the importance of defending and supporting Ukraine. We also have to be very aware of the threats of North Korea, who continues to bolster and grow their nuclear arsenal and will continue to develop weapon technology. So it is always the right and responsibility of the United States to defend itself, defend allies, and invest in those key partners. And that's what I intend to advocate for. And I also tend to advocate for the use of force, because I am intimately familiar with this, having served for so long, that the use of force should be a last resort. And enemies should know that we will happily engage when needed.
Now, one of the big quandaries in the Ukraine war is if we don't support Ukraine with weapons and humanitarian aid, obviously they're going to lose, and Russia will dominate them, or at least annex some of their territory. But on the other hand, if we can contribute too much, then we could start World War III. It's a very fine line. Do you think President Biden should be doing more, or do you think he's towing that line? And what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, so I think President Biden's doing an excellent job. Having served in the intelligence field for so long, there is amount of information that the public's aware of and sees and tracks and gets reported on, there's a huge amount of things that are happening that the public's not aware of. So when you combine what the public's aware of with what the public's not aware of, we have an amazingly robust support network that is aiding and supporting Ukraine in their fight against this unjust action and invasion that is killing thousands of innocent people. So I'm very proud of what we've been doing as an armed force in engaging and supporting what's happening in the Ukraine. And I think we need to continue that effort.
Do you think that Joe Biden should listen to a lot of people who say that he should not run again? His numbers are dismally low. I voted for him personally. I always thought he was a pretty good guy, and certainly compared to Donald Trump, it's night and day. Do you think he might be hurting the party if he runs again? What do you think should be done for 2024?
Yeah, I think President Biden needs to keep working on what he's been working on. Keep working on trying to help rein in inflation, trying to find solutions to lowering gas. That includes renewable energy and continue to invest in renewable energy so that we have a great degree of energy independence around our renewables and wind and so forth. And I think also part of this is just kind of global circumstances with Russia invading Ukraine and other situations. But I think Joe Biden's going to be the right person to lead the charge in 2024.
Great. What's your prediction on Ukraine? How do you think it's going to end? Of course, nobody knows, but do you have a gut feeling that Putin will ultimately prevail, or he's going to have to back down? They say his health is shaky. There's footage of him quivering and unsteady on his feet. What do you think the outcome's going to be? What's the exit strategy on this?
The ultimate, what happens is the good guys and gals are going to win. We're going to win. We will prevail. Ukraine is an amazingly proud and feisty population. And ultimately, I think Putin will withdraw significantly from the territories that he's possessed in Ukraine.
Do you think Vladimir Zelensky should be Person of the Year with Time Magazine?
It's a great. I think he'd be a phenomenal Person of the Year.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Now, you mentioned before Israel, obviously South Florida, or what we call Brooklyn South. There's a large Jewish population. I'm Jewish. What do you think about the whole Palestinian? They claim that the Israel's occupied their territory. Israel says it's biblical legitimacy. It seems like an endless struggle, an endless conflict. Every generation thinks, well, we're going to fix this. What do you think ought to be done there? Do you favor giving up land for peace? Do you think that the Israelis should be hard-nosed about it? What's your feeling on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? What should be done?
Yep. So Israel is a incredibly special ally, unique ally to the United States, and should always be treated as such. The solution is a two-state solution. And I am confident we can get there. I think if with fair dealing, and I think the United States can play the amazing part of helping make this possible, but I really am convinced, Fred, that we can get there. And I'm convinced we can get there in the next 15 years. I really am. I think there's real interest in getting there. And I think it's up to us as leaders. And that's one thing I will be absolutely committed to, is working with our partners in Israel to really find a solution. I think we can get there. I believe we can get there. And I'm confident we can do it.
Okay, now we get to one of the burning issues of the day, and that's runaway inflation, pain at the pump, eggs, milk, staples of life are just going out of control. The Fed, as you know, raised the rate yesterday 0.75 of a point, which I think is the largest hike in 20-year history of the Fed. Do you think that this is going to reduce inflation? Do you think there's it should be a higher interest rate? Because every time you do one thing, there's another reaction. Then people can't afford to buy a home, or they're forced to buy a home that they didn't really want. What do you think is going on in this country, and what can be done to fix this?
Yep. So I think the rate hike will help. And I think as a community, as a country, we need to do more around lowering housing costs. And so what that means is we need to invest more in workforce and affordable housing. Additionally, as we have, especially here in South Florida, we have communities that are at risk due to coastal sea level rise and climate change. The HUD and FEMA offer grant funding post hurricanes and post disasters. What I want to do when I get elected to Congress is actually turn the reactive grant funding into proactive funding. So let's harden our infrastructure. Let's invest in communities before the tidal events and impact of climate change and impact of weather events happen, so that we have more sustainable, stronger communities that can survive difficult times and thus help bring down the cost of housing.
Okay, great. Now, you mentioned your opponent briefly before. As we near the end of this interview, and I think you're a phenomenal speaker, by the way, and
Thanks,
I don't know anything about you. Obviously, you're Broward County. Are they ever going to change it? They were supposed to change it to Fort Lauderdale or Lauderdale. Do you know?
There's been discussion of it. I don't think it's moved forward as of yet, but there's discussion about it.
Yeah, yeah. So what can you tell us as far as Oppo research? What are the weaknesses? Oh, by the way, do you know how many people? Obviously, tomorrow is the deadline. But who else is in this Democratic primary? And then we'll go to your opponent, your principal opponent. I know there was Hava Holzhauer. Do you think she's going to file, or has she filed? Do you know?
I think she's filed. Yep, I think she's registered. Yep, Hava Holzhauer, Jared Moskowitz, I mentioned, me. Then there are a couple others that I think have filed, but that are in the process. So I think ultimately it'll be 4 or 5 or so people.
All right, but you obviously, I would say you and Jared are the front runners at this point.
Yep.
Here. So what else can you tell the voters that are watching this why you don't think your opponent should be supported? What are his weaknesses? And then I'll let you give it the other side. What do you think his strengths are? But start with the weaknesses, because everybody likes the negatives, and it's always the sexier subject. What are Jared Moskowitz's principal faults or weaknesses?
Sure. So I'm a lifelong Democrat. I believe in democratic core values and principles of fairness and equality. Jared Moskowitz has been given 2 political jobs by Ron DeSantis, who I think leads horrible policies and pushes marginalizing communities, marginalizing LGBTQ, attacking schools, attacking parents that want to keep children safe during COVID. And Jared Moskowitz was the emergency management director under Ron DeSantis, reported Ron DeSantis, carried out Ron DeSantis's COVID policies. So if you remember, I mean, I know we're getting a little away from COVID already, but if you remember, Ron DeSantis was choosing specific communities of privilege to roll out vaccines. Jared Moskowitz was enacting that policy. Ron DeSantis was attacking school boards, taking money away from school boards that wanted to have children wear masks. My children, I wanted them wearing masks. Jared Moskowitz was part of Ron DeSantis' engine that enacted these horrible COVID policies. We do not need someone, do not want someone that is going to be attacking our schools, attacking our communities, our minority communities. And this is what Jared was doing under Ron DeSantis's watch. So that is not what we need. And then another piece that has come out is when Jared Moskowitz was working at Ashford, a private contractor. Jared Moskowitz was the lead general counsel there. And that company during that time wrote a $500,000 super PAC check to a Trump super PAC in 2018. I reject Trump policies and the super PAC policies that he perpetuated. And it turns out this was even an illegal contribution that Jared was writing back and forth with the FEC about. So those are not the values we need as Democrats representing us in Congress.
All right. Weather is a big story. Call it what you will, global warming, climate change. This week, there have been record high triple-digit temperatures, I think, across the Southwest and the South. Here in Florida, it's been 90 all week, but of course, we're used to it. You know, we're Floridians. What can we do Is it too late? Is the earth screwed, to use the vernacular? Can we reverse this, do you think? Or what do you think is the best approach on this?
It's not too late, Fred. It's not too late. And we've got to make this a real priority in the state of Florida. And it starts by doing the things you and I have talked about, which is we've got to hold sugar accountable. We've got to hold, emissions standards to a higher level. I mean, we've got to really engage around this and know that collectively we can do more. And we've got to re-engage, and President Biden has been doing an excellent job re-engaging with the global community, because we've got to do this together. But we need strong Democrats here in South Florida leading the charge. We are ground zero for climate change, for sea level rise. And that's why we need someone that's convicted in our democratic values to stand up and not only lead kind of our congressional district here, but our Democrats around the state to stand up and say, hey, we are going to take a stand here. And Republicans, if you're willing, take a stand with us. But we are not going to accept the status quo any longer. And we're not going to subject our children and our grandchildren to deteriorating environmental standard here in the state of Florida. We're going to turn it around, and I'm convicted to do that.
Well, I certainly appreciate, your vigor and enthusiasm. I remember we had Jeb Bush, I think Trump called, or what do they call him, Sleepy Jeb or something.
Yeah, right.
You certainly don't match that description. You're a very persuasive speaker, and I appreciate that. Let's ask you a personal question. What kind of a vehicle? Are you driving internal combustion, or do you have an electric car? And what do you think? Is that going to be a key component in reducing the global warming or climate change?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of it. And we have a internal combustion SUV, Ford SUV, and our daughters both say, when are we getting an electric car, Dad? And you know what? They're right. So that needs to be when we transition from this car to the next. That's what it needs to be, because the more we can all do that, the more safe and environmentally friendly our communities are going to be. So
speaking of transition, just shifting gears, recently there was some talk about the Olympics. There was a man had transitioned to a woman, I believe, and was winning all of these swimming contests. I don't know that this is necessarily a national issue. Maybe it is, but do you feel that transitioned men that become women, who probably still have more male genes for strength, endurance, do you think that they should compete with women?
Yes, I'm a believer, Fred, that we are all equal, and we want everyone to be able to compete and feel comfortable. And when Ron DeSantis was attacking transgendered athletes in the state of Florida, I just reject that. We talked with our daughters about this, and I hope our daughters, if they compete in sports, that they compete against transgendered athletes and they understand them and appreciate them. We had one of our commissioners kind of attack a transgendered member of our community here in Fort Lauderdale, and that transgendered member of the community was deeply offended. And I went out to work with that person and spend time with them and support them and encourage them. So I think it's up to all of us to encourage and support all members of our community. And also, Fred, it stands to a national security standpoint. In the military, it's not what gender or orientation as a person sitting next to me that we're fighting to protect freedom and democracy around the world. I want the best person there, whether they're transgendered or not. And that's something I am going to continue to advocate for, because MAGA Republicans like Ron DeSantis are going to be attacking not only the right to choose, but I think their next target is going to be the right to marry. And I think it's also going to go after the right to contraception and a whole host of factors around privacy rights that we need to collectively stand up and say, no, we're standing against you and with members of our community. And that's what I intend to do in Congress.
Okay, on a related subject, the country went through a very long trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And of course, he ultimately prevailed. There's a $10 million judgment now against his former wife. Some people say that this spells the end of the Me Too movement or the Believe the Woman movement. Do you feel that this trial set back women's rights any? She's even admitted in a recent interview that she did some horrible things in the marriage. I won't go into the gory details. I think we know what I'm talking about, but it has to do with bed sheets and so on. But what do you think about that? You must have had some seen some clips and so on. Do you think that that's a setback for women's rights and Me Too and all that?
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna have to kind of go after this question, if that's all right, Fred, or maybe one or two more. So this is something that I live with every day. In my house, we've got my two little girls, my wife, and our rescue dog, which is a girl as well. So women's right, we need to recommit ourselves to equality and women's rights like never before. My hope and dream is that when my daughters get to the age where they can work, that if someone says to them glass ceiling, they will say, what are you talking about? I don't know what that concept is. And men need to be part of this solution. We need to be advocates for equality across all genders. That's something I'm convicted, I feel so strongly about doing. And we can do it. We need to do a lot more as a society. We have regular setbacks, and it's up to all of us to really advocate for that, because we are a better, stronger, more robust society when there's equality.
Okay, just a real quick grab bag. Any good books that you've read? You know, they always say, what's the book on your nightstand? Any books that you?
A friend gave me. It's not easily available, but it's the history of Black Americans in Fort Lauderdale. And it's a great book, and I love Florida history, so loving reading that. That's probably the one that's on top of my bookshelf right now.
And what about newspapers, magazines? What do you read on a regular basis?
Yeah, so being in the Navy, we read a lot of what's called open source reporting. So I like reading. Not only do I love reading kind of our New York Times and all the publications we have here, but I'm also a big believer. Read international press. Read some newspapers out of England or Europe, and it really helps give us as Americans a broader, more helpful perspective. So that's what I'd encourage all of us to do as well.
Right. I know you have to get going, and do you want to just make a minute or a summary statement? Why should people vote for you, and what are your key strengths? By the way, we never said anything good about your opponent. Do you want to quickly say if he has any strong points? That's always the interesting question.
Yeah, sure. I don't know his family well, but Jared has a beautiful, wonderful family. He's got, I think, 2 children. And I'm sure a wonderful wife. And so, I think for all of us running, it's such a challenge, such an emotional process, and having strong families, love and support is just critical. And I'm blessed to have that. I'm sure that's what he has as well, and Hava and the others as well. And that's so sustaining during the tough time of campaigning.
Sure.
So that would be one of the things that would come to mind. And I'll just conclude with this. Fred is saying, I'm Ben Sorensen. I'm the vice mayor of the city of Fort Lauderdale. I've been a vice mayor and a city commissioner for years here in Fort Lauderdale. I'm a former teacher. I've been in the Navy 14 years, and I'm a small business owner. And I have the experience not only working with the federal government through my Navy Reserve duty, but also finding real world solutions in Fort Lauderdale, working with the federal government, getting flight paths changed out of Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport with the FAA, working to get a federal court built here in Fort Lauderdale, which is what we're doing. So working on fair housing. So for all those reasons, experience, abilities, ask for your vote on August 23rd. Again, Ben Sorensen running for Congress. Thank you, Fred.
Okay, thank you very kindly. You've been very generous with your time and very good answers to a lot of important questions. We're now concluding this interview with candidate Ben Sorensen. Once again, he's running for Democratic candidate for Congress District, the newly formed District 23, which now includes a piece of Palm Beach County where Sentry Village is. And the primary again is August 23rd, with all early voting probably starting in the middle of July. Thank you again for your generous time and wonderful interview. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you for the first time, and I hope you win. You
Thank
seem
you,
like
Fred.
you'd be a very, very good representative for us.
I